Which basketball players have COVID-19? With most of the basketball players in the NBA Disney bubble, the sport is relatively safe from the dreaded disease. But this doesn't mean our favorite b-ball players were altogether immune. Find out in our video today which basketball players have COVID-19. Welcome to Trending's Finest, where we give you the hottest updates on the world's most viral news, videos, and stories in the most exciting format. Click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to not miss a single beat of the world's pulse. A number of NBA basketball players and individuals associated with the league have tested positive for coronavirus. The NBA has allowed players to make their test results public, but also supports those players who don't want to make their test results public. Find out the available list so far, the lowdown on the magical NBA Disney bubble, and most importantly, the 3 NBA players who tested positive while inside the bubble. Stay tuned. Rudy Gobert, the first NBA player who tested positive for COVID-19. Jazz center Rudy Gobert says he lost his sense of smell due to COVID-19. The positive test set off a chain of events unlike anything we've ever seen in the NBA. The Jazz-Oklahoma City Thunder game was called off, and a short while later, the league suspended the season, and other major collegiate and professional sports leagues quickly followed. Feeling much better now, Gobert donated $500,000 to support workers at Vivint Smart Home Arena in Salt Lake City, as well as health services in both the U.S. and his native France. Donovan Mitchell, Utah Jazz. In the days since he tested positive for the new coronavirus, Utah Jazz All-Star guard Donovan Mitchell said he did not experience any symptoms of the pandemic. Mitchell's case came after his teammate, All-Star center Rudy Gobert, became the first confirmed case of coronavirus in the NBA on March 11th. In Mitchell's update video, he said he was feeling fine and taking the proper precautions in being in isolation. He also pointed out how he thinks the possibility of showing no signs that you're sick could be the scariest part of the virus. You may seem fine, be fine, but you never know who you may be talking to and who they're going home to. Christian Wood, Detroit Pistons. After remaining under the care of team medical staff and in self-isolation since his diagnosis, Detroit Pistons forward Christian Wood has been cleared from the coronavirus. Wood was cleared in late March, the source said, after becoming the third known player in the NBA to test positive for the virus after Utah Jazz teammates Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. A Pistons spokesperson said the team was not authorized to comment on Wood's medical status. Kevin Durant, Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn Nets star Kevin Durant isn't overthinking his COVID-19 diagnosis and recovery. Based on his interview, he's just focused on the fact that he's alive and he's good. He also points out that the unknown is always scary, but he's had a lot of support. Durant declared on March 17th that he had tested positive for the coronavirus and added that everyone should be careful to take care of yourself in quarantine and that we're going to get through this. Marcus Smart, Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics guard Marcus Smart has been cleared of the coronavirus since late March. Smart revealed he tested positive for the coronavirus on March 19th with a video message explaining how important it was for everyone to take the pandemic seriously. Now in the Orlando bubble with the rest of his team, Smart understands why players may view the virus as less of a threat if they're not directly impacted by it. But the 26-year-old knows the virus affects everyone differently. That's why he'll be taking necessary precautions, such as hand washing, staying inside, and physical distancing, and wants others to do the same. Nikola Jokic, Denver Nuggets. On June 23rd, Jokic tested positive for the coronavirus just as the NBA began testing protocols. After staying quarantined for 14 days in his native Serbia, he experienced various traveling logistics that prevented him from rejoining the team. Jokic had no intentions to test for COVID-19 since he was asymptomatic at the time, but since the NBA required league-wide testing before teams could travel to Orlando from July 7th to 9th, Jokic took a test just as he planned to leave his native Serbia for Denver. He then received news that he did not expect. Now in the Orlando bubble, for more than a week after he tested positive, Jokic said the NBA's doctors can't predict how the virus might impact him during a physically taxing postseason. Malcolm Brogdon, Indiana Pacers. Few people have had such a whirlwind journey to the NBA's restart than Malcolm Brogdon, who didn't get to play due to a neck injury. The Pacers point guard injured his hip and missed the last 3 games leading up to the NBA stoppage on March 11th. He then had a prominent role in protesting social injustice in his hometown of Atlanta. On June 24th, it was announced that he contracted COVID-19. After following all relevant health protocols, he later tweeted that he was feeling well and ready for Orlando. Jabari Parker, Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings forward Jabari Parker, 25, said he tested positive in mid-June and immediately entered a period of self-isolation. He tested negative just 5 days later, but then he tested positive again, delaying his return to the team. That pattern repeated itself a number of times before he produced consecutive negative test results as required under NBA protocols. Buddy Hield, Sacramento Kings. In a packed gym full of spectators without masks, Sacramento Kings guard Buddy Hield lit it up in a pickup basketball game. Then he had to sit out the beginning of the Kings training camp in Orlando while he recovered from the coronavirus. Speaking to reporters on a video conference call following his first practice with the Kings after clearing quarantine, Hield was asked if he had any regrets about how he handled the NBA's hiatus. Confidently, he said he wouldn't do anything differently since he didn't get it playing basketball because a lot of guys he was playing with, none of them got it. Hield tested positive for COVID-19 weeks after his controversial pickup game and had to travel to Orlando separate from his team while he completed a league-mandated recovery protocol. The fourth-year guard admitted that he should have paid more attention to his surroundings, been vigilant about washing his hands, refrained from touching his face, and worn a mask. But he also says the virus caused him only a little head cold and chills one night. Alex Len, Sacramento Kings. Alex Len, 27, said he tested positive for COVID-19 on June 22nd. His symptoms worsened in early July, as in no smell, no taste, and according to him, a little bit of chest tightness. He continued to test positive for 24 consecutive days. Len said he feels no lingering effects of the virus, but he still isn't in top condition after such a long layoff. Derrick Jones Jr., Miami Heat. When Derrick Jones Jr. tested positive for COVID-19 during tests conducted on June 23rd, he wasn't sure how his body would respond. But 3 weeks later, the 23-year-old forward was practicing with the Miami Heat as the team prepared for the resumption of the season at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex in Walt Disney World. Jones was cleared to travel with the team to enter the NBA Central Florida bubble after returning multiple consecutive negative COVID-19 tests prior to the trip. Spencer Dinwiddie, Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets will be without one of their most crucial pieces as they play out the remainder of the 2019-20 season at Disney World. This is after they were already down stars Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. Brooklyn will now be down guard Spencer Dinwiddie, who announced that he's also decided to opt out of the remainder of the season. Dinwiddie tested positive for the coronavirus and was symptomatic. When his diagnosis was originally announced, Dinwiddie said it was unclear if he would play in Orlando. But after a second positive test, the Nets team doctor decided he shouldn't participate out of abundance of caution. DeAndre Jordan, Brooklyn Nets. Jordan is the 5th Nets player who did not make the trip to Orlando. DeAndre Jordan announced on Twitter that he tested positive for COVID-19 and will not join the Brooklyn Nets at Disney. With Durant and Irving out, the Nets had little to gain by playing Jordan in Orlando anyway. Next season is ultimately what matters to Brooklyn. Their hope now is surely a speedy recovery for both Jordan and Dinwiddie. Landry Shamet, LA Clippers. The LA Clippers got lucky that Landry Shamet's COVID-19 diagnosis came early. He was also asymptomatic. Now, Los Angeles Clipper point guard Landry Shamet is recovered from the coronavirus and arrived at Disney World Resort to join the team. Taurean Prince, Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn Nets forward Taurean Prince tested positive for the coronavirus and has been ruled out of the NBA's restart in Orlando. Prince is the 4th Nets player who won't participate in the league's restart because of the coronavirus. The late timing of Prince's positive test for the coronavirus caused him to be declared out of the restart, with the necessary protocols placing in jeopardy his body's build-up back to basketball. Thomas Bryant, Washington Wizards. After contracting COVID-19 in early July, former Indiana forward Thomas Bryant said he's feeling 100%. The Washington Wizards traveled to Orlando on July 7th, but Bryant didn't join the team in the bubble until July 15th. Upon his arrival, he had to spend 36 hours in quarantine before he could leave his room and begin practicing. Gary Payton II, Washington Wizards. Wizards point guard Gary Payton is still not with the Wizards in Orlando after testing positive for COVID-19. Payton was reported to have the virus on the same day as Thomas Bryant. While Payton has yet to make the trip to the bubble, hopefully he's okay. Keep watching to find out the details of the NBA Disney bubble. Could it be as magical as it sounds? And more importantly, the 3 NBA players who tested positive while inside the bubble. The NBA Disney bubble. The NBA resumed its season in a bubble in Disney on July 30th. The 22 NBA teams that moved to Orlando aren't allowed to leave the Disney World campus without permission. They must wear masks except when they're playing basketball, eating, or outdoors. Sequestered in 3 hotels, players are subject to regular testing and frequent temperature checks. They can socialize with other players while keeping 6 feet of distance. No players have tested positive while in the bubble so far. Comparable setups have worked similarly well for the National Hockey League, the Women's National Basketball Association, and some other professional sports. In a press release, the NBA announced that of the 322 players who arrived in the NBA bubble July 7th, 2 players tested positive for COVID-19. Those 2 players were not cleared from quarantine and have since left the bubble campus to self-isolate in their own homes or in isolation housing. Players have been tested daily since teams arrived in the bubble from July 7th to 9th. A total of 19 players have tested positive since July 1st, when the NBA began its protocol of daily tests. Russell Westbrook, Houston Rockets. The league did not disclose the names of the 2 players, however. Earlier in the day, Houston Rockets point guard Russell Westbrook announced that he had tested positive for the coronavirus prior to the Rockets leaving for Orlando. He's now back with his teammates at the NBA's Florida Bubble Complex and spoke with the media just before his initial return to the practice court. Westbrook indicated that he viewed his case as being asymptomatic, saying that he only had a stuffy nose. Now 31 years old, the 9-time NBA All-Star and 2017 MVP then used his platform to make a statement about wearing masks as a means of preventing further spread of the coronavirus. Westbrook said, "Wearing a mask can be the difference between life and death, honestly. People are dying from this virus each and every day, and it's something we need to take very seriously." Westbrook said he was away from the basketball court during the time with COVID-19, in line with the NBA's protocols for at least 14 days of self-quarantine. He also had to test negative for the virus multiple times, including on the 2 days after his arrival at the bubble. Harrison Barnes, Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings small forward Harrison Barnes is the latest development in the list of positive coronavirus cases. Barnes tested positive for the coronavirus in early July, shortly before the Kings flew to Orlando as a team. His recovery took nearly 3 weeks before he was able to register 2 consecutive negative tests. Michael Beasley, Brooklyn Nets. Nets' Michael Beasley has tested positive for the coronavirus from inside the bubble and left the facility on July 15th. Beasley, 31, was signed by the Nets on July 9th as a substitute player to take part in the league's restart because the Nets have seen their roster decimated by a combination of injuries and coronavirus cases ahead of the resumption of the season. As a result of the positive test, Beasley will not be rejoining the Nets inside the Orlando bubble. Instead, the Nets will replace his roster spot. NBA players are wearing several hats in the bubble campus, including being social justice superheroes, all while pursuing the coveted championship. But lost in their heroics is the fact that in their 80-plus days in the bubble, they are still flawless as far as positive cases of COVID-19 are concerned. What do you think? Is the NBA Disney bubble the right idea? Is there truly such a thing as safe from the virus? Tell us in the comments down below, and let's make a conversation out of it. The biggest sports news is still one to watch out for, the Tokyo 2020, now 2021 Olympics. Watch our other video to discover how the 2021 Olympics are expected to be. We give you all the details, including the risks they're considering and the precautionary measures they're planning, some even involving robots. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching. This is Trending's Finest. Always the trendiest, always the finest.